Okay, here we go. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the last session of the Starboard Portal for 2020 that's focused on DEI. We're very fortunate to have been able to collaborate tonight with the Inclusivity, Diversity, and Equity Task Force, TIDE, from the ICSA, and we have a really great mix of presenters that were current sailors in college, we're former sailors in college, current sailors in college, and then coaches as well. It's a really diverse and cool mix, and so the conversation tonight should be pretty awesome. First, before we dive in, I want to thank Corey Radke, who's not on screen tonight, but is involved with TIDE and helped put this together. I had the good fortune of working with her on a number of different events. She's a rock star, and on behalf of US Sailing, I just want to say thank you to her for helping put this together and spearhead it. So thank you, Corey. So without further ado, let me introduce our moderator, Brianna Pravancha. Many of you may know Boston College, class of 2012, five-time college national champion. She's currently the sailor athlete director for one of them for the US Sailing Board of Directors. She's a former Olympian, was a gold medalist at the 2007 ISAF Youth Worlds and a gold medalist at the 2007 European Championship in the 29er. And she's currently an MBA candidate at the Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth. She's been super involved with US Sailing for a number of years as an athlete and helping to direct us moving forward. I've been fortunate to see her on a couple of different Starboard portals, and we're fortunate to have her back again here. So, Bree, good evening.
Good evening, Stu. Thanks so much. That was a too long of an introduction, but that was very kind. Thank you. Thanks to everybody for joining. Thank you for being passionate about college sailing and for being, committed to creating a more diverse and inclusive community within our sport. This is such an important topic, and I'm really excited to be moderating this, and even more excited to introduce our panelists. We have a really great group here. So without further ado, I think so we can get right to it. We'll go through and introduce. You guys can go ahead and introduce yourselves, and we can start with Preston, and maybe, say a little like where you're from, a little bit about how you got into sailing, and then, why you're passionate about this topic. And we can just go, I'll because I think everybody's screen is different. So Preston, do you want to start?
Sure. My name is Preston Anderson. I'm from just outside of Chicago, just northern suburbs. I started sailing when I was 8. My mom put me in a camp at the Northwestern University Sailing Center, and just immediately fell in love with the sport. And I'm passionate about, diversity and inclusion within college sailing, just because I think that there's a lot of potential for college sailing to become a more diverse and inclusive space. And yeah.
Awesome. Omari, do you want to get off now?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. My name is Omari Scott. I am from the tiny island of Antigua. It's in the Caribbean. I started sailing very early at the age of 5. I think that there's 2 ways that people usually end up sailing: is either their parents take them out on private boats, or you end up in a sailing camp. I was lucky enough to live 5 to 10 minutes walk away from the Antigua Yacht Club, and I started with a camp with my older brother and a few other friends, like most people have. I attended Hampton University, which is a HBCU, historically Black college or university. It's the only HBCU in the US with a sailing team. And I think that for me, the how, when, and why I ended up in Hampton is a great story that I think will contribute to the goals and the desires of the outcome of this discussion. So again, my name is Omari Scott. Really happy to be here, and thank you for listening.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining. Elena, do you want to go next?
Of course. I'm Elena Alston. I'm from New Orleans. I also go to Tulane University. I started sailing kind of on a whim in high school, just sort of fell into my lap and I ran with it. And this is important because since I've started, not necessarily always been easy to decipher where your place is in the sailing community. And I just want that to be easier and a little bit more concrete for people coming after me.
Awesome. That's so great. Thanks for taking time. I know everybody has such busy lives, so we're really glad you're here. Mitch.
I think by now I'd have known to unmute myself. I'm Mitch Brindley, and I'm the head sailing coach at Old Dominion, and I've been coaching since the late 1900s, and so I'm also the president of College Sailing. Grew up sailing in Texas originally, and really. I've been a huge fan of supporting, bringing new people into the sport and opening up our doors and making sure there's open and equal access to the sport for everybody. I think we only benefit by having different people and people that are different than us participating in our sport and engaging, and that's what we're looking to do.
Awesome. And last but not least, Anna.
Hi, I'm Anna. I currently live in Pittsburgh. I've been sailing pretty much my whole life. I got into it because my parents sailed. Never forced me into competitive sailing, but guess just have the competitive genes, so picked it up. Attended Old Dominion University, where Mitch was my coach, and taught me a ton about sailing and kind of helped me get to the next level. And I'm psyched to be here because I think college sailing is kind of one of the best places that anybody can really pick up the sport. You don't have to have really any experience coming into it. And I think anyone and everyone can dive into it in college sailing.
I totally agree. And hoping that that's a theme that we can leave tonight with. And as we dive into some of the topics, the first question that I have is for Elena. And just to give her a quick plug, because she didn't mention it, she's not only just on the Tulane sailing team, she's the captain of the team, which is incredible. And in the pre-session that we had, I got to learn more about her story. And so I think it's fantastic. And I think other people who are watching this will love to hear it. So can you tell us more about your path, what you love about sailing, the team that you're on, and the work that you're doing with ICSA?
Yes, so my path is a little bit more non-traditional than the other people here. I moved in the middle of high school, and the first girl to kind of be nice to me at my new school invited me to come sailing with her. It was something I never did. I'm from Texas initially. And I capsized my first practice, and I just fell in love with, I don't know, living on the edge of sailing. And so I kept going back to practice, and there's just a unique competitive edge about the sport, because there's so many decisions that fall on you. It's not like other team sports. And so, that day, junior year of high school led me to Tulane sailing, where my amazing coach, Charles Higgins, has worked with me, as I did not have the talent that the other people on the team do, but we have an amazing community there. ICSA has a lot of club teams where people start sailing in college, so it's never really too late. And yeah, we've just worked to get to the next level together.
Awesome. And so as you've come into the sport, I can imagine that it's been challenging. You mentioned when you gave your intro earlier, finding your place and, having that sense of community. I'm just curious, and maybe for others to hear, what some of those challenges were and how, what excites you specifically about the work that you're doing to just make this better for the people that come behind you.
Yes, of course. So I shared this with you guys earlier, but one of the stories that happened to me early on in sailing that's really stuck with me is I was at a yacht club, getting ready for a skipper's meeting like everyone else. And an older gentleman came up to me and handed me like a dirty plate in his cup. And I was confused for a second. I didn't understand. And it dawned on me that he thought I was part of the wait staff at the club. And so I kindly told him, I was like, oh, like I'm here to compete. Like I don't work here. And he just looked at me and he said, interesting. And then he walked away. And that just stays, like, it hurt my feelings so much. And I was disappointed in him. I was disappointed in the way some of my teammates did or did not react. And so, yeah, it's something that stuck with me. But I think that this year and last year, we've made a lot of progress in educating everyone and opening up and having honest conversations. And I'm extremely excited with the amount of energy people have brought to the table and wanting to move over and turn over a new leaf and change the next generation, because we can't change the existing one. So
I thank you so much for sharing that. I'm like shocked that I mean, I think, you know, this is not, I think that this is not a sport for just white people, you know, and not and older people. And we have to be cautious about being inclusive and being accepting. And I think this is such a great reminder, like and this was recent too, right? I mean, this is something that it wasn't, you know, 3 years ago. Okay. But I just, you know, we have a lot of work as a community in sailing to have that inclusivity that is going to drive more people to our sport. And so, my goodness. Well, we are so lucky to have you in college sailing and to be such a big part of this. And you're such an inspiration. I hope that a lot of the college sailors listening tonight will really will take to what you're saying, because I think it's so special, and we're very lucky as a sport. And so I was recently made, I mean, I probably should have known this, and this is on me, but I recently was, because of all the great work you're doing, made aware of Tide. And I want to talk about it because I'm not sure that a lot of people really know what it is and know all the great work that you guys are doing. And so ICSA, which is, you know, the Intercollegiate Sailing Association, has a diversity, equity, and inclusion task force that was started recently in June of 2020. And so now moving to Preston, so I know you're involved in this, and I'm, you know, can you tell us a bit about Tide, how it started, and you know how it came to be?
Yeah, definitely. So TIDE stands for the Inclusivity, Diversity, and Equity, and then ICSA Task Force. I kind of have two kind of parallel stories, just because it's there's one, I got really involved in NISA and on the ICSA level at the same time. So it really, for me, kind of, they're very parallel stories. So right after the George Floyd incident happened, I was having a lot of conversations at school, at Bowdoin, with a bunch of different groups on campus and in my own team. And one of the discussions that we were having on campus was that how can we, you know, get involved with these initiatives, and how can we extend out to our communities. And one of them was like, we were going to partner with other NESCAC schools. And and it got me thinking, just because sailing is just not an NCAA sport, like, could we possibly do something that's sailing specific? So I texted my coach, Frank Pizzo, and I was like, hey, would NISA be interested in possibly forming, you know, doing some diversity inclusion stuff? The Bowdoin Athletics is like kind of thinking about doing stuff with the other NESCAC schools. And he got back to me. He's like, yeah, definitely. You know, you can pull together a few other people So I texted a few friends that I knew from growing up in high school sailing and a few other people I knew from New England college sailing. And I was recommending a couple other people from other coaches. And we met on Zoom and were able to establish a committee within NISA. And at the same time, we saw that the ICSA was hosting a webinar that Mitch and Allison Chenard ran. So a few of us went on to that webinar, and one of the things that came out of that was the ICSA task force. I was like, oh well, I'm getting involved in the NISA committee. Why not get involved with the ICSA committee as well? So that's kind of how it started in my view. And some of the initiatives that we are working on are like developing education tools for teams and coaches, just so that they can feel comfortable talking about these issues. But we are also developing resources for community outreach and finding other ways to bring more people in, and finding ways to like advertise on our own school campuses, so that we can bring more diverse and diverse people into the sport.
That's incredible. I mean, that's a really great story. Thank you for your leadership and for inspiring others to want to participate in that. I think it's great. I'm guessing. I mean, if I were in college now, which I would love to go back to college, but I'm guessing for a lot of people who are listening to this, they might be wondering, how can I get involved? And this is so great. Like, what can I do to help? So I'm curious, Preston, like, what are the options for people who are listening, who are, excited about all the work that you're doing, and what are ways that they can help?
So every conference is trying to start up a TIDE committee. NISA has nearly almost every single team involved. In NISA, we asked for a representative from every team to serve on the committee, and I believe we have, like, I would say 95% of the teams within NISA to have a representative. So, and if other teams want to get in other conferences, if they go to the college sailing website, and in the about tab, there's they have to click on the TIDE committee, and our email, our TIDE email is in that on our website. That's if they email us telling them that they want to get involved and let us know what the conference they're in, then we'd love to keep expanding these committees. Yeah.
Perfect. And I think Stu just put the link for that in the chat, which is great. So for anybody that is listening, click that. I will go back to this, watching this recording, and I will click that. So I think that's great. Thank you for sharing that.
I'd also like to mention that we would love to have alumni get involved as well. One thing that we're trying to do in NISA is get some alumni input to hear what their experience is as well.
Love it. I love it. I love all of this. This is so great. Okay, so Omari, you talked a little bit about, Hampton University and currently, I know you're one of the coaches of the U.S. National Opti team, and we've had the pleasure of coaching together quite a bit. And I know how inspired, you are for the kids that you work with, and I know a lot of the success that you've had. And so, can you share a little bit more about your story to Hampton, and how you landed there, and what was exciting about it, and how you ended up, in Miami doing all the coaching things you love to do?
Yeah, so this is a funny story. To be honest, it's, I thought about it long and hard, and at first I was like, no way, I was back home in Antigua, finished high school. I just started doing like college in Antigua, just graduated, like doing a 2-year like associate's degree situation. And my coach back then, who was Carolyn Grant, was down in Antigua, I guess for a regatta, maybe Antigua Sailing Week or something like that. And I think she did quite a bit of talking to some sailors from different countries and stuff. And she came down and she was just, she asked at the yacht club, this guy, Omari Scott, who is he? So I got this phone call my mom was like, hey, they want you at the yacht club. Like someone's here to see you. I'm like, to see me? I went down and there she was. And she was like, oh, I read some stuff in articles about you. And so I'm like, okay. And then she was like, well, you could continue education and do sailing. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm making money right now. I'm okay. Like, and she was just like, look, Hampton University. She gave me some brochures. She said, look through it. It'd be great if you really love sailing. This is the schedule. We compete almost every weekend. And, you can continue your education and just go from there. So for me, it was a situation where I had no clue that it even existed. I had no information. The norm would just be, you go through school, you go through college, you get your degree, and you start working. And sailing for us, which was quite sad because my older brother was way better sailing than I was. And a lot of the guys end up after a while, they quit because it was like, okay, we're going to do this. We're doing it for years. We do it competitively among ourselves or regionally, and nothing comes after, right? Thankfully, now what's been happening in Antigua is the community that we have, the sailing community. A lot of these younger guys are moving on to sailing big boats, being personal crews on big racing boats, or they go off and do other things. Some guys are getting into coaching, but my story was just in the beginning, I had no clue. It didn't appeal to me at all. It's like going back to school again. I was like, no way. And then I thought about it. I was like, look, if I can go better myself through education and also be able to sail, which is what I really love to do, and compete at a very high level, because we did inter-school soccer and cricket and things like that, basketball, but never sailing. So I was like, look, if I can do this in college against, some of the top sailors in the US, it would be awesome. So for me, I was just lucky, right place, right time. And I decided, I spoke to my parents about it, and they were like, oh, it's going to be expensive. And that was a big thing. And we sat and I thought about it for a long time. And they said to me, look, if you want to do it, because it's all positives. You're going to get to further your education, and you're also going to be there being happy, being able to sail and just making yourself better as a better sailor. So we sat around it, we talked about it for weeks, and then we decided to do it. And I ended up at Hampton by myself. Went there, had no one in the US, didn't know anyone at all. And it was just me, and me with my crazy accent back then. I didn't speak to anyone at all because I thought everyone's going to look at me as a weirdo. But come to turn out, I found out that they were very fascinated about the accent. So I became pretty popular really quickly. So so that's kind of my story, just the right place, right time. And to this day, it's like the best decision I've ever made because it's set me up for so many things because of the people I've met and things like that. So no, that's kind of my story of how I got to Hampton.
Awesome. And so then, you sailed for the team, and then after that, you decided that you wanted to stay coaching, and you kind of said, this is my path. Or walk me through how that worked.
Yeah, so sailing for the team for me was awesome. I actually ended up getting 2 more of my buddies from Antigua to come and sail at Hampton. So just me being there, I was able to get a couple of my friends to follow the path. And that was amazing. So I ended up being there with a couple of my buddies as well, and we sailed together, and it was awesome. So for me, after I finished sailing my 4 years at the school, I thought to myself, I knew I wanted to do something in sport. I knew that. And I was like, I want to do something in sport, but I want to find a way to give back at the same time, which is kind of difficult. You're like, oh, you're doing sport, you got to figure out how to do that. And I decided that if I started coaching, even if I was getting paid, I was looking at it as a situation where if I start coaching in the Caribbean, I can help these guys to see more of what the possibilities are. So I moved back and I started coaching St. Lucia for 4 years. I coached the British Virgin Islands for another 4 years and kind of built their program. And basically what it was to help them become more competitive because we have a lot of talent there. We live on the ocean and we sail a lot. It's just that the exposure is not there, the opportunities, financially, it's difficult for us to travel to different events and things like that. So I wanted to kind of put that there. I wanted to kind of take them to regattas and things like that, do fundraising to be able to get the finances to do that. So for me, I was giving back by coaching sailors in the Caribbean and trying to create that path that I had, because I had the opportunity and realized how amazing it was and how much we are all missing out. So that's what I did. And I was able to have a couple other friends and kids I coach who are now in college. And it just makes me, it's amazing. It's an amazing feeling for me that I feel like I had something to do with that. So that's kind of where my coaching thing started with. It started with wanting to do it in the Caribbean to help the kids there that I know have the talent to do it, and just to kind of open their eyes. And then after that, it was, I just fell in love with it. I felt like I knew what I was doing. So one opportunity after the other.
We all need that person to kind of show us the way a bit, to be like, hey guys, I know there's this thing over here that's great. And so I totally get that. That's awesome. And so I can, as your coaching has evolved, I can imagine that you've gained some perspective as one of the only Black coaches in America in sailing. And so I'm curious, if you could talk a little bit about the perspective that you've gained since you've been coaching, and what you and those listening can take away from that.
Yeah, one of the big things I got from that was just obviously the world has to do more, right? For me, it's, I spoke about college sailing. How could we educate the sailors in the Caribbean or wherever they're from? Because as I said, I had no idea, right? And maybe sending brochures here and there, things like that. And recently I had a sailor, my ex-Opti sailor, who came up to me fresh out of Optis, and he said, look, Omari, I have a question to ask you, but I didn't know how you were going to feel about it. So he asked me the same question. How do you feel as like you show up at a regatta and you're like the only Black coach there? And I said, hey, awesome question, because he did not know how to ask me that without, I guess, offending me or something. And I'm talking about a kid who's 15, 16 years old, right? And I said to him, look, man, that's an awesome question. And I'll tell you the way I feel. I said, I feel like I'm carrying the torch. And I said to him, for me, like, I like to break what you call breaking the barriers. Like I go in and I go to Garda and there's hundreds of coaches and I'm the only Black one there. And I'm friends with all these coaches from Slovenia and everywhere else. And they respect me just as much because they know this guy knows his stuff. So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter where he's from, he knows his stuff. And for me, that's the thing. I'm just trying to show everyone that, like, if I can do it, anyone else can do it. And it's one of the things that I am very proud of. It's one of the big reasons why I am a coach, because I think that at this point, like, I'm out there trying to show everyone, that the potential is there for anyone to be able to do it. But obviously we'd like to see more, right? So for me, just being the one person there, it's great. But my goal is to actually get more people involved from different races and things like that. So that's how I look at it.
Yeah, it's so great that you have that mindset, because I think being great at something is definitely, it helps you get the respect of people. And I can imagine, for those that want to come and learn our sport, that don't have a lot of experience, that feeling is just even more compounded, because not only do you not know that much, but you also look very different. And so, that's just something for us to keep in mind as we meet people at the yacht club and as we, interact, to just try and be really, forward and inviting and talking to people and saying hello and welcoming. I think that goes such a long way. So it's really cool that you're in our sport, and this is great. So transitioning to someone who definitely knows their stuff, Anna. So we all know you. You didn't mention this in your bio, so when you introduce, so I will. A lot of us know you as an accomplished sailor and 2008 Olympic gold medalist. What some, you mentioned, they might know, you came from England, and some might not know that you're also a champion CrossFit athlete. So, you have spent so many years as an elite athlete, which is just incredible. I'm curious, so we talk about diversity, with race and skin. There's also gender diversity, being, a woman and trying to, like, what Omari was talking about is like, how do you get respect in a pool which is predominantly male? And you have a ton of experience with that. And so I'm curious, what you've learned through your experiences in sport and what those watching might take away from that.
Yeah, so I think the cool thing about sailing is that anybody can do it. It doesn't matter if you're gender or race, right? So even from the early age, you grow up sailing opties and everyone's out there. And so from just very, very early age, I think I've not really thought about it, and I've just always not liked losing. So I've always wanted to try and beat anybody and everybody. There have been a couple times, and I do remember like one specifically where I was yelled at, like, "Oh, you think you can get away with anything just because you're a girl sailing in a co-ed fleet?" And at the time, it kind of really bothered me. And looking back on it, it kind of, now I'm just like laughing at it because I'm like, okay, well, that was more me beating them that was getting under their skin than anything else. But I think to me, it's always just been like head down and prove yourself, right? Like to gain the respect, like earn it to me. So I've always just gone out and fought as hard as I could. I grew, my last year of youth sailing, I sailed full rigs, and I sailed against Andrew Campbell, Clay Johnson, like the top laser sail, like of my generation, the top laser sailors. And I was at a massive weight disadvantage, but when we had the 7-knot races, I could beat them. When the 14-knot races came in, obviously I didn't stand a chance, but so it was really cool just to compete against these guys. And to me, like I said, I didn't really think about it because I think that's what's cool about our sport is that you can just push forward. And yes, it is hard at times though, when it does come to, and I think I've just been really fortunate that I've been successful. I've had great teammates and great coaches that have helped me get to the top of the disciplines that I've sailed and allowed me the opportunities that I have had to sail on other boats as tacticians, to sail with all male crews. But I do think it is hard for girls to get positions on those boats just because of being a female in, a fairly male dominated sport. But, I think that the times are changing a little bit, which is good, but I think it's really, I think the approach is just keep pushing and driving as hard as you can and not thinking about it so much and trying to just do it. And I think that's how the respect comes when you get the results and you can battle with them.
Yeah, so I have one more question, Anna, for you, but I just want to mention to anybody who's listening, we will take questions at the end and as we go. So feel free to throw some in the chat and we can address them as they come up, because we want to make this, as informative for you. So if there's things you want to hear, we can, we want to address those things. So keep the questions coming. So Anna, one of the really interesting things about so as Stu mentioned, I'm a first year at business school. And one of the interesting things that the women in business groups are talking about is this concept of men as allies. I'm throwing you on the spot here a bit. So I'm curious, of some of your, you mentioned the friends and you've had great teams. I'm curious, the men that you've competed against, I mean, is there a moment or something that they said to you that really just inspired you? I mean, are there moments where, you can think of where a guy just really encouraged you and supported you and you were like, wow, that was really cool?
I can't remember one specific one in that sense, but I think just growing up with them and like sailing with them, and chatting between races and hanging out on shore and joking about the race, kind of feeling that sense of acceptance that like, hey, like I'm there with them, like I can beat them. They know I can beat them, joking about me beating them in the lighter winds, or getting a position as a tactician on a boat and it being like, okay, like not thought of as like, oh, we're not really going to listen to her, we're just giving her that title, like, yeah, making calls and like we do in the calls, like it kind of in a sense like validated that like, hey, yeah, I'm good, I earned this spot and people listen to me. One thing that was said, and I don't think it was meant in a motivating way at all, but it did motivate me, was I was talking to someone about, hey, why don't you require girls being on these teams or something like that? Like have one girl, make it mandatory that there's one female on a team. And the person I was talking to said, well, why don't you just earn your spot? And I was like, all right. So in that sense, like it really kind of motivated me to be like, yeah, like that's a valid point. Like I'm going to work really hard to earn my spot. And I think it was kind of meant as a motivation, like earn it, but at the same time, like, yeah, you're good enough to earn it, to keep working at it. So I think kind of the encouragement and the conversations around it at the times kind of just were like, yeah, okay, this is right.
I love that message. I love the, put your head down, keep going, don't think about it, earn it. And I think, hard work does reward. And I think having the courage to just show up is so important and something that we overlook sometimes. I can imagine, showing up is the hardest part. Once you get there, it seems like it's easier. And so I think another thing I'm hearing you say, Anna, is that it's not so much about, for those men or those people who are listening who want to be allies. I think it's not so much about treating people differently as it is just about, hey, do you want to grab lunch? Or do you want to go, do you want to get a drink, or do you want to hang out? And I think that even that off the water camaraderie and on the water camaraderie is important and something that we can all make sure we do more of. So Mitch, I think you have a lot of experience. I think you have 25 or 30 years of coaching experience.
That's a long time. It's probably a lot too, but it's definitely a long time coaching. Yeah.
I mean, you must have seen the sport evolve, and you must be, thinking about where it is now versus where it was, and be proud of that, and also be thinking about how much farther we have to go. And so just a quick plug here for the ODU team, because, as long as I can remember, your team has always had a female coach, and you currently have, one of the only BIPOC coaches in college sailing. And that's fantastic. And I think, we always talk about the benefit of diversity and having different perspectives and how that can lead us to better solutions. And so I know there's a push in college sailing and in Olympic sailing and in our sport in general to get more female coaches. And so I guess my question is, why do you think we're struggling to get female coaches? And, of the ones you've worked with, why are they such an asset to your team?
Well, it's a completely different perspective that I, as a male or white male, doesn't have. I can think that I understand, and I can try to understand, but it's a different perspective. It's so important to have those, different opinions and ideas and experiences and background. That will inform the decisions you make on the team and the leadership and everything else. And so I've loved all the coaches that we've had, and from a variety of different backgrounds, and the contributions they make are outstanding. And I certainly see, it's always joked, why don't we have more women college sailing coaches? And the joke has always been is because they're smarter than the guys are, but the reality is we're probably not as hospitable of a group as we should be. And so that's where I think, we as, in the coaching world need to make sure we realize what we're doing, and that we are, promoting and listening as we should, and to, not only to women, but to, area, whether it's LGBTQ or whatever, that we need to make sure we're listening and make sure that we are actually creating a engaging and welcoming environment. Sometimes we don't. That's something we have to work on in college sailing and in the sport as a whole. I think that's a big part of it. We're hopefully we can continue to do that. It seems that we haven't, it seems that I've just noticed over the years that sometimes the co-ed team, the women in particular, are hard on the female coaches. And this, in my experience, and I don't exactly know why that is, but I know across the board in college athletics, they've kind of gone there's been a struggle in bringing more women in coaching, and I'm not sure why it is, but it does seem like we've been harder on women's coaches than the teams are. And I sure hope that we're working towards that. And I just don't know why that is, but it seems like that's been the case. But I know, it's great to see, so many. We do have, I think it's like 13% of our coaches roughly in college sailing are women. That's not very much. And then there's, maybe a handful of head coaches that are women, and we need more there. It's, at the Olympic level, we see a lot more, we're seeing more and more, women, female coaches, and it's awesome. And so they've got so much to share, and, so many skills, and I think it's a very inspiring story.
It's really interesting when you think about this idea of women women athletes being harder on women coaches. Like, that is something that, I'm curious to dive deeper into this. And I'm sure, Anna, you are at the top of a lot of sports, and I'm sure you've had, male coaches and female coaches. And I'm curious if you have a thought on why maybe that is. I mean, is it an ego thing? Like, what do you I'm curious to get your thoughts.
I've been thinking about this question and really trying to, come up with the answer. I really keep falling back to it. Most likely it's an ego thing. I don't know, girls being girls. But, and it's sad, like, it shouldn't be, right? Like, that if your coach is your coach, you should have a respect for them. And, I've definitely had female coaches, not full-time coaches, but like every now and then, like, brought someone in. And in a way, I would say, like, even myself, I would say, to me, like, I loved all the female coaches I had. But my relationship with them was more of a friendship. Let's talk about things versus, a coach down to an athlete relationship. And in that setting, it worked fine. And I don't think it was an intentional, like, oh, I don't respect you or anything like that, because I absolutely did. But I think just the way the relationship worked was approached slightly different than I would say my relationships with my male coaches has been. But yeah, like I said, thinking back on it and trying to really find an answer, I would say most likely it comes down to girls being girls and egos, which is sad.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I want to go back to something that you said, which is with female coaches, you think it's more of a friendship, and so maybe you're not expected to be pushed, and so your gut reaction is, oh my gosh, like, you're supposed to be supportive, like, you're a woman, I'm a woman, like, we're supposed to be in this together, and not so much like a, you're here to make me better type of a thing. And I know when I coach, I really struggle with pushing, because it's uncomfortable. You look at the athletes and they're like, why are you doing this? Like, you're making this really hard for me. And so I think there's work on both sides of it, which is, one is, as women, we need to be pushed. We need to allow ourselves to be pushed by women. And then the athlete side, or the coach side, we need to figure out how to break that barrier from friendship to coach. And I'm curious, and maybe others can jump in here, how female coaches, the ones that are listening, can do that. I mean, do you have ideas for how to kind of go beyond to tread that balance of being a friend versus being a coach?
I don't think I have the magic answer, Mitch.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a good question. And, but I think you're onto something there, Bree. I really do. And it has something to do with the relationship. I think I remember a time when, with Anna, I don't remember what it was about, but I was, we're on the water, and being emphatic. I was probably yelling. It was my best coach on my part, yelling. And she's like, why, kind of like upset. Why are you yelling at me? And it's like, and I was like, do you want me to treat you like everyone else, like the guys? And she's like, yes, okay, then I'm gonna yell at you. And I remember what it was. And yeah, we're great to get more. I know some of the struggles we've had that I've been aware of in the past has been that balance line between a friend versus someone that can push me, that can push the athlete. And that's something that we've got to realize. It's like, yeah, they can, people are going to listen to Anna because she's Anna, and they tell her to do whatever. They're going to, yeah, I better do it. And because she's telling me I got to do whatever the WOD is, or whatever the sailing drill is. It's like, she's going to do it, and you're going to do whatever she says. So
I think a little bit is approaching something with confidence too, right? Like if you feel really confident in something and what you're doing, I think you come across as like people are more willing to share and kind of buy into your idea. That idea of just being like, hey, let's have a conversation. What do we want to do? Everything like that. Like, I find if I go into a coaching situation where I'm trying to be more like, team level player, it works great, but it's definitely a different sort of atmosphere than if I come in and be like, hey, this is what we're doing. This is why, and come in with this amount of confidence. Then it is a little bit more of a, oh, hey, right, we're going to do what she says sort of situation.
We're going to do what she says. That's going to be a phrase that we're going to hear a lot more often. I have in the world. Sorry, I just had to throw that in there. We have a question from the chat that is, what's one change you would make to the sport of sailing that you believe would increase diversity and access? It's a tough question. Does anybody have a thought?
I think, yeah, I mean, for me, I think that, to be honest, again, that's a tough question because it's changing it's not going to necessarily solve it, right? So I think that for me, when I talk about the background, it's more about getting information out. I guess that's probably what it is. I feel like we need to target more certain areas. And for me, when I go back to my story where I say I had no clue collegiate sailing existed, if more people knew that it existed, then you probably have, you may have 5%, but it's 5% more than what you had 10 years ago. So for me, I think what I would change or what I would try to improve is more of getting more information out, making a special effort to get the information out as much as possible. I spoke about even, in the Caribbean islands, just having brochures or something sent from each school to the yacht clubs, having them sitting there, and people who are interested will come by and take a look, or, going to a big Caribbean regatta and having a representation from colleges or something, go down there and just kind of talk to them, say, hey, these are the possibilities. These are the opportunities. Like, you guys have the grades, you can sail, you love to sail. Here you go. This is something you could be doing. So I think it's getting the information out there, just getting it out as much as we can. And again, it's not going to solve everything, but what we're looking for is improvement, right? And any way we can, in small increments, it's going to be better. So getting the information out there as much as we can and figuring out ways to do so effectively would be my answer to that.
Thank you for that. I think that's a great answer. And that's something that people can do easily. Just communicate and share information. That's a really easy thing that a lot of us can do, tomorrow to start making our sport more inclusive. Preston, I'm curious if you have thoughts on that question.
Yeah, I'd like to echo what Amari said. Like, we do definitely need to get more information out, because I feel like there's definitely an information gap about, what college sailing is, and who can participate, because really anyone can participate in the sport. Like, you can walk on, I know for my team, you can walk on having no experience sailing, and, we'd accept you. But another thing that I would change is finding ways to make gear more accessible. I know that sailing gear is extremely expensive, and one of the things that I worked on in NISA is like this gear exchange for college sailors and ex-college sailors in NISA to list their old gear on a spreadsheet so that people can find cheaper gear online. That's one thing I would change, just because I feel like if we are able to find ways to, for people to, find a cheaper life jacket or a cheaper spray pants, like I feel like people will feel more comfortable feeling more comfortable joining the sport,
Yeah, there are some costs that you have to kind of pay to get into our sport, and those are very high. I think a lot of us wish that it was easier to access and to start within our sport. I know a lot of people are doing some great work on that front, but I love your idea of a gear exchange. I think that's great. And I think that that's something yacht clubs can do, or just, have gear that people would, give to the Goodwill that might not be the best place. Maybe they have like a locker with things that people can borrow, maybe not in COVID world, but and hopefully in the near future. It's a great idea. So we have another question coming in. I'm going to direct this one to Elena. And this is a great question. And Omari, Preston, if anybody else wants to weigh in after, would love to hear. So what is one thing you would like or suggest that white people in sailing do to make people of color feel more comfortable and welcome in the sport? It's a tough one.
No, I think it's a great question though. I think a lot of times people are nervous to ask that question. And one thing that we've been kind of drilling is dialogue and education have to come prior to change. So there's nothing that I can tell you that you can do and you're going to change and everything's going to be amazing tomorrow. So the first thing you can do is start a dialogue, find someone willing to talk to you, willing to be open and honest with you and discuss what they're feeling, what they think needs to change, how you guys can grow together. And once you kind of pinpoint areas where you may be lacking in knowledge, then go out and educate yourself. There's a plethora of movies and literature and podcasts available, especially now. So yeah, once you have that dialogue, go out and educate yourself. And then once you know what the history and how people are feeling and you understand that, then you can work on change mechanisms and getting involved with things like Tide or getting involved with things like community sailing. But I would not recommend just going and doing it for a day and, calling it quits. You really need to make sure you understand the root of the problem.
So, if I could summarize what you're saying, it's that, if somebody wants to make, you guys more comfortable, it's like invest, like be in this for the long run. This isn't like something that you just do one time and think that you're being helpful or supportive or, so I think that's a great message. And I know there's resources that we can all do to get educated and be more allies, especially in the sailing community. Preston, Omari, Mitch, anything on that question?
Yeah. I have one thing I think I'd like to say to that. And again, this is super difficult because you walk into a situation when you're the only one and it's kind of like, do I even belong here? I work with kids now a lot and I see it not just from boys to girls, but it's the same thing with the skin color, right? And I think allowing someone who's different. So I do this with my program with my girls. I allow my girls to contribute a lot to everything. I allow them to contribute because they go in, you have 5 girls, you have 30 boys, and they already feel dominated, right? And then when they go in there and they feel dominated already, they feel like they have nothing to add because they're just like, the small group, then they won't add anything. And that makes them feel even more out of place. So I feel what you said with the white and the black, if I was in a situation, I walked in and I see all these guys, a different color, if they allow me to contribute to what's happening and listen, because you never know, this person might have the greatest ideas ever. Once you allow that person to feel like their contribution makes sense or actually is worth it, or we're listening, then I think that people, or that person will become more comfortable and feel like he's a part of something, he or she. So as I said, I do that with my kids now, where my girls, I allow them to contribute. I make them captains, things like that, because it's important for them to feel like they're part of it. It's a place for them too. So I feel like that's something that could possibly change, and that probably will help the confidence of that person to feel like they belong. That's what I would say.
That's great. Preston, I saw you go off mute. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I was just gonna echo what Mari said. I think they should be like, you should make the. Sorry, let me restart. I feel like people should make African Americans or whoever's in the minority feel valued. I think they need to be welcome into the conversation. I struggled for the longest time in middle school and high school when I was growing up through the sport. Having my identity challenged by other people, just like questioning whether do I actually belong in sport? Because sailing is a predominantly white sport. I think what we have for current preliminary analysis is that college sailing is like 86 to 88% white, and I think if we want to invite more people in to the sport, they need to feel valued. I think it needs to, they need to feel like their contributions matter, is what Amari said. I think that's where it starts.
Yeah, I'm hearing too almost like an awareness element, like being aware of when you're dismissing ideas that other people might have, or when you're in a call like this and you hear a couple people speaking and a couple people who are silent, being the person that's like, hey, we haven't heard from you, what do you think? And trying to be that leader amongst your friends and in your group, and being aware of that. I love that theme. I think that's great. And so we have a couple minutes left before we wrap up. I think this has been wonderful. We have one question that came in that I think is great, that we can just kind of popcorn, which is, what can we do to create more access at the youth level, kind of, prior to college sailing? And I'll add on to this, even like in college sailing, and knowing that, our culture is white, dominant, elite. Anybody? Preston?
Yeah, I can start off. I think, what people can do is, with their own clubs, start, gear drives, and start seeing how they can reach out to other, groups that don't necessarily have not necessarily like partnered with yacht clubs. Like, I think it was Karen Harris who said it on the first DEI Starboard Portal, that invite other groups into your space, and they will want to come. And I think clubs can do that, and invite other, like a YMCA or a Boys and Girls Club for a day of sailing. Take them out for a day of sailing. I think that's one way that we can start creating more, bringing more people in, is creating gear drives, inviting other groups in on do a friend, take his friend to sail day, but with a different YMCA Boys and Girls Club, and finding ways to start scholarships. That's the last thing. Start scholarships to lower the barrier to entry.
Yeah.
Omar,
I would say the same thing.
Mitch, yep.
I was just gonna say the same. Try to, especially at the club level, the yacht club level. Obviously, over the years, and probably 10, 15 years, we've seen a lot of growth in community sailing programs, which do provide some broader access, which is nice. But so much of the waterfront is privately owned, and so many people can live within just within, a couple blocks of the water and not have access to it. And there's this private yacht club or marina with that access. So more clubs, and it's nice about with the growth of high school sailing, and oftentimes operating out of these clubs, and if a public high school has a sailing program and they're operating out of a private yacht club, it provides access. At least it's getting some non-members on the grounds, and having those club members be open and accepting to visitors and to guests of high school sailing programs. Since we weren't doing any college sailing this fall, I got to watch a fair amount of high school sailing. My son was sailing, and seeing, being at some of the local sailing, at like Norfolk Yacht Club here, and seeing that, some high schools sailing out of this facility, and it's great for them to have access. It's important that members are welcoming, and otherwise, yacht clubs are all going to be dinosaurs, and we've got to make sure that we're bringing new and different people into these places.
Yeah.
Anna, what do you think?
No, I agree. My first thought was like a scholarship sort of offer thing, into yacht clubs. For summer programs, like apply for it, or if you do bring a group in that goes sailing, and then say, hey, we have this scholarship offer, and make it to multiple kids. So it's not just one kid by himself, but maybe it's 2 or 3 of them as friends that want to come and do the sailing program for the summer. And I think it's got to be like a whole, like an extended period of time, because just dropping in for one day, like, cool, great, we went sailing, but whatever, go back to, whatever our normal sports are, but having the opportunity to do this sport for an extended time to really kind of get kids learning the sport and wanting and falling in love with it. And I think additionally, my other thought was in college, like I know Mitch, my freshman year, my crew, Cristobal, was a walk-on, never sailed, never actually been in the water at the ocean, despite living in Virginia Beach a whole life. And I think I would say I was the 3rd women's skipper on the team, but he gave me this brand new crew, never sailed. And, she stuck with me for 3 years and became almost All-American. But that sort of like, it was kind of, to me, I was like, well, why am I getting a brand new person sailing? But it really kind of got her involved, and she got sailing a lot, and she got a lot of experience, and kind of really fell in love with the sport herself. So I think from a sailor's point of view too, like, not always thinking, hey, I deserve the best crew, or I deserve the best skipper, like, grabbing somebody and being like, hey, let's make a team and let's go racing and let's do the best we can. And I'll teach you what I know, you teach me what you know, and, let's go from there.
That's so great. Yeah, you don't have to be an expert to add value, I think, is something that I've learned probably more often, more this recently. But so I think, Omari, I feel like you have something to add.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's awesome, because I think, again, it is difficult. I think there's 2 things: importance and care, right? And what I mean by that is anything is possible if you care enough about it, or if you think it's important enough. So, like, if you want to get different groups, and all the ideas that everybody has mentioned make sense. You do the scholarship thing, maybe during your summer camps, you can say, okay, go into the schools and say, hey, look, as a PE class, like, this is what you do. You pay half of what it would cost just for the use of the boats, just to get the kids out there. But I feel like, when I was in the Caribbean, I had to do that. Like, I went into schools and, say, hey, come try it. We have a Sunday fun day. I don't think we do enough, because I don't think we think it's that important, right? And I feel like anything can be achieved if you care enough and you think it's important. So yeah, get out there, get into schools, do a situation where you have, maybe if you have an 8-week summer camp, you run maybe 2 weeks of kids from public schools or something like that. I just think that that's something that we could definitely step up on. I feel like it's hard work to get it to happen, because you can invite 1 million people and it could be free and they don't show up, but it's hard work, and that's why we don't do enough, everyone. And we think as a world we can do more. But when it's difficult, people tend to turn the other way. But if it's super important to you, then you will do it. And it should be super important to everybody, because I think there's so much talent out there, things like that. Just like Anna, my crew, I mean, obviously was recruited straight off the campus, never sailed before, but she was an all-star sprinter in high school. So she physically was strong, and she was like, look, just teach me. And at the end, when we were done, she was able to sail races as a skipper. And she's never, so it's just different things. But I do think that if you think as a program director that this is super important, you can make it happen. You can make it happen. It's going to take a little bit of work, but it can happen. So that's my piece for that, I think.
I love that. If you care enough, it will happen. And I think, I know that there are a lot of people in the sailing community who do care about this. I know, I sit on the board of directors at US Sailing. Everybody on that board is passionate about this subject. We're working very hard to make some changes. And so I think, if you guys have ideas, we are open to them. I think, and all of you guys here, for the college sailors who are listening, who care and who want to make this better and who want to be involved. I think you guys, now we have this great group of people that you can reach out to and get advice from and share your ideas. I think, as Omari mentioned, this idea of sharing information is super important. And so with that, I'm going to pass it back to Stu because we're a little over time. But I've really enjoyed this. So thank you, Stu, for inviting me and for thinking about doing this wonderful topic that is very important.
No, thank you for helping drive the conversation, Bree, and thank you to all of our panelists for spending some time with us and sharing your thoughts. I mean, it's I got to confess, I'm sitting on the other side of this and I've got the camera off and I'm just sitting here smiling and thinking about the fact that people like Preston and Elena are the future of the sport. And that's super cool. I do want to note that I'm going to put in the chat, there's a link to our DEI committee, talk about connections to folks that are working at US Sailing. And I also wanted to point out, in the group that are watching, we have both the president, Corey Sertle, and the vice president, Rich Jepson, watching this. And so what you said, Bree,
of course they are watching this. They're of course watching this.
Yeah.
They care.
Yeah. And they've been with us on a lot of these panels. And so this is the last one we're going to be doing for 2020 on this topic, but it's certainly not the last one we're going to be doing. And, I will be calling on all of you. Thank you for your time, your leadership. And this has been awesome. So really, really appreciate all of you participating. One last thing, happy belated birthday to Omari. I think you had one yesterday. And to Preston, who's got a birthday on Sunday, right? Is that right?
Thank you.
Excellent. So awesome, guys. Thank you very much. Really appreciate all your time. And thank you to everybody who's watching and supporting this initiative as we move forward. So